Hello, fellow writers. I'm Lewis. That over there is Tolkien, and you have found the Scripturian Society.
Welcome, everybody. This is your place to come for any kind of like writing chatter that you want to enjoy.
Yeah.
Um, that over there, as mentioned, is Lewis, aka Carissa Harlow, and I am Tolkien, aka Ashley O'Rourke. You may know me from That Pretentious Book Club. And if you listened to our last episode, we got to do a fun joint episode with the Scripturian Society and That Pretentious Book Club. So that was really fun. If you guys are it's past Christmas now, but if you are not ready to let go of the holiday
Yeah.
spirit, you
If
can
you're
still
clinging
listen to it.
really desperately to the
Clinging
Christmas
desperately
spirit,
to it.
we have an episode for that.
We do. I had to go throw away our tree today. I don't usually throw out our tree until at least the new year. And sometimes I keep it like well into January because I'm like, it's still winter, you know?
Right.
But I had to go to okay, so get this. This is crazy. Okay, so sad news is our dog passed away recently.
Yeah.
So she was a Great Dane. So she lived on this big couch, right? That we originally got for us and not for the dog, but she quickly took over it and destroyed it. And so she's very old. So she slept on it for years. So we wanted to obviously get rid of the couch because sad memories. So we managed to fit it in my car. And then I was calling around like landfills to see where I could go drop us off because it's so destroyed it cannot be donated. And one of them wanted to charge me $148 to drop it off. And I'm like, that is half the price of a couch. That's half the price of the couch I'm sitting on. Like,
oh my gosh, that's
crazy.
so annoying.
So I found a recycling facility that was even closer, and they were like $50 for the whole carload. And I was like, for the whole carload, you say? Would you take a tree? And they were like, absolutely, we'll take a tree. And I was like, bye, Christmas tree. I guess Christmas is over.
For sheer cost benefit.
Yeah, because we don't have a dumpster at our apartment complex. You'd think we would. We have one trash compactor that's usually broken. So
that's fun. Yep. Fun fact, I've never had a real Christmas tree. They've always been fake.
Still?
Yeah.
This is so sad.
I mean, this one's fake. That one's not real. There's one behind me. It's very small.
The little silver one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't typically grow in that shade.
That's true. But no, I've never had a real one. I've never like gone to get one or anything.
But the smell of the Christmas tree.
I know. That's just not part of my memories.
That is so wild because my whole living room kitchen area until today smelled like a little Christmas tree. And it was a tiny one too. It was just so fragrant and wonderful.
Yes. I mean, it does sound nice.
Now it's at a recycling facility.
Yeah, now it's gone. I thought that was a thing people only did in the movies for most of my life. I was like, people don't do that.
No way.
And then I started talking to people that did it, and I was like, oh, interesting.
It's real. Yeah. It's crazy though, because depending on where you live, it's more or less achievable. Like the first year that we moved back to Texas, we got like a scrawny little Charlie Brown tree because trees in Texas, it's very expensive, like easily like $60 to $75 for a medium-sized Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And then when I lived in Oregon for a little while, we lived in the town we lived in used to be the Christmas tree capital of the world. But anywhere you go in Oregon, it's like $5 for a giant tree, $10 for a giant ass tree.
They're like, please take these trees off our hands.
They're like, we have so many trees, we don't know what to do with them. And it was awesome. So it really is. So when we lived up there, we definitely got really big trees, but also everything everywhere smelled like pine trees. So like the smell itself wasn't specifically a Christmas smell. But now back here this year, I got another mini tree. It was $25 for a mini tree. And I was like, wow, this is a lot of money for a short little tree. It was just too big to put in the broken compactor. So yeah,
of course. Nice.
That was my day. I went and took that out to the recycling facility today. So
nice. That's
I'm
fun.
so capable. Yeah. It's like the third or fourth time I've had to take something out to like a landfill or recycling facility. So
yeah.
What did you do today? We're recording much earlier than usual, which is awesome.
Ash has the week off of work, right?
I do. Yeah, I wouldn't have
super flexible.
Picked this week usually to get a week off, but it was like a mandatory. No one's working this week, but we're going to pay you. And I was like, okay. I mean,
nice.
Sure, I'll take it. Absolutely. I love time off.
Right?
Yeah.
Let's see. I haven't really done much today. I'm trying to think because it's been a couple weeks since we recorded. I wrote those down. Oh, okay. So I got some pretty cool Christmas gifts that I want to talk about. First of all, for those of you that are watching it, my mom made me
It's
this,
so
like, I don't know if you can see it
cool.
because it's like super bright in my room. But it's like a Scripturian Society symbol mug, which is super cool. And I have a notebook, and that's really fun.
It is so fun. It's inspired us to give you guys merch. So if you guys want,
Yes.
you'll be able to get your own Scripturian Society merch soon so you can match Carissa.
Well, exactly. But
Yeah.
it was mine first. So
Yeah. So she's still the coolest, but you guys can also participate. We
Exactly.
are gatekeeping, but not fully. The gate's a little bit open.
Yeah. You can slip in, but no crowds.
No crowds, which all the writers were like, thank God.
Yeah. And then another really cool thing I got is it in my drawer. Can I pull it out? No, it's too far away. My family in Kentucky, who are like not direct relatives, it's like my dad's aunt's family. So it's like my cousins once removed and my second cousins and all of them.
Mhm.
They got me an like embosser tool so I can put my name in all my books.
Oh
So
my
it
God.
says Ex Libris Carissa Harlow. And so it just like embosses them as like a brand. And it's so cool.
That is amazing.
It's awesome. I didn't even know I wanted it, but
Now
it's a
I
really
want
cool
one.
thing.
And I didn't know I wanted it.
It's so cool.
Wow. I think this is the first year I didn't receive a book or a notebook or anything.
Yeah.
Like for Christmas. Javi got me some super cool gifts. First of all, he got me some like some that haven't like arrived yet, but he ordered from Ireland some like medieval Irish like clothes.
Nice.
So I'm very excited. He totally nailed that. But he also got me, well, first of all, my engagement ring from so we've been married like a year now, but my engagement ring was, we kind of at like a Renaissance fair. So it was really pretty and it had like a real little opal in it, but the opal got very, very damaged because I did not know how to care for it. So he went out and he got me a new engagement ring. He surprised me. It's so pretty. I need to get
wearing it on the wrong finger.
I am because he wanted me to have it for Christmas, but they didn't have it in my size. So we're going to take it to a resizer. But if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it's kind of hard to see because it's so shiny, but it's another pretty opal because I love opals. So that was really like fun and surprisingly sentimental. I was like joking around as I was opening this gift because like it was the last one he wanted me to open.
Right.
And I was like, haha, it's going to be something ridiculous, right? Because it's Javi, right? And he's not an openly sentimental person.
True.
And then I'm like, it's like a little jewelry box, like a little velvet one. And I was like, oh, whatever. Like, are you proposing to me again or something? Yeah. And then I was like, oh my God, you're proposing to me again. It was fun. But then two more gifts I'm equally excited about are he got me a dive knife. So when I free dive, so when you free dive or scuba dive, it's a good idea to have like at least one or two knives on you. So if you get caught in something, you can cut yourself free. Or like if there's like something down there that's caught in a net, or you want to like get a rope off the bottom or something just to clean out the water, you can cut it free. And so you strap it to your leg. And so he got me a really cool one too. And so I've been like carrying it from room to room. Like this dive knife is my teddy bear now. Aw. Right there. I'm looking at it. He also got me a tiny little bee house so that I can begin building my bee army.
That's so cool.
I'm going to begin building my army of bees.
I didn't know you wanted to be the leader of bees, but
I do want to be the leader of bees.
All right. Nice.
Well, Javi and I would really like to raise bees for honey and make mead at some point. Far into the future, because I want to have like a very specific type of like bee box, and they're I don't know how to make them, which means probably gonna have to buy them, and it'll probably be very expensive. So it's just like the little start. It's like 6 inches by 6 inches, and it's got a little pointed roof, and it's a little bee house. So I'm not gonna get any honey from these bees, but they will be. I called it the barracks. It's the bee barracks for my bee army.
Cute.
It's where everything will start.
Nice. The beginning of something new.
The origin story. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. Did you do anything fun on the actual Christmas Day or Christmas Eve?
Well, my mom and my brother and CJ came over for Christmas morning, and we all opened gifts over here. And then Christmas evening, we went over there because the dog couldn't be left alone that long. And so we made, I made beef Wellington, and it was so good. It's a lot of work for a single dish, but oh my God, it was really, really good. I was so impressed with myself because the last time I tried to make beef Wellington, it did not turn out right. because I did it the lazy way. And the thing is, you cannot make beef Wellington the lazy way.
You are all in.
You have to be all in. So I was all in this time, and it was really good. Nice. So I've had like so much. This is like one of the first Christmases where I'm not joking when I say like I've pretty much only eaten like cookies and sausage cheese balls and holiday food and junk food. Like that's what I've been living on for like a week and a half. So I'm sure I've gained like 10 pounds.
Oh yeah.
I literally just had like a piece of Christmas candy right before I got online.
Nice. I know I've had so much sugar over the past week or so that the other day my body was just like, we need vegetable. So I ate an entire can of green beans.
That's hilarious. All right. Hobby's been telling me forever that I don't eat enough fruits and veggies. And then I had like this like weird like pain in my side and ended up being like this, like, you know, like a cyst. Girls know what I'm talking about. And so basically I went to the doctor and it ended up having like a long discussion about my health and my habits. And she was like, so you do eat fruits or veggies? And I was like ever have I have.
Like, I know the taste of an orange. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Like I can recognize the taste of the fruits. And it's bad because I really do try to make veggies because I try to make my husband eat healthy. I just don't like, especially just don't like fruits. And there's only a few veggies that I like. So she was like, so you need to be like eating better and also taking supplements. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, your body has like none of the nutrients it needs. So now I have to like take these vitamins too, because she's like, your body is so deprived of good things. And I was like, dang it. And I've been, part of it is too, I've been having all sugar and I have a sugar problem. Like I really get addicted to sugar really fast.
Yep.
Hence the box of candies right next to me. And I just had a like giant gumball earlier this morning too.
Nice.
But I balanced it out by having a protein shake for breakfast. So that makes it all healthy, right?
Right. Exactly. My problem is that I don't eat a lot throughout the day. I eat like maybe 2 or 3 times and I only have 1 or 2 things. So it's hard to get a lot of nutrients out of that.
That is hard. Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is like, I thought I was being really healthy. Like before my wedding, I was trying to like lose weight and get in shape so I could fit in my dress or whatever, the whole, you know, most stereotypical bridal thing that everybody does.
Yeah.
And so I was doing intermittent fasting. And so I was like not losing weight and I was exercising and I was eating relatively healthy. And I was just like, how is this possible? And then I started doing Noom, which by the way, I love Noom. If anyone's like, I want to get healthy and not hate my life, I highly recommend Noom. So it was great. And I felt like I actually got healthy, but they were like, yeah, so you need to like eat breakfast. And I was like,
yeah, I was going to say fasting is not a good way to lose weight.
It is not a good way to lose weight at all. I mean,
because your body goes into starvation mode and it will keep things instead of letting them out.
Exactly. I know some people swear by it and maybe for some people it works. Like if you have a special metabolism, for me, it did not work. And it's so sad because if I'd been doing Noom then I would have been so in shape because I was so in shape on Noom and I wasn't deprived of anything, but you do have to eat every meal. And that means you have to eat healthy stuff for every meal, which is like, it was really hard. Now I have to like,
sounds terrible.
It was terrible. I mean, it wasn't terrible because most like diet plans or eating plans are really genuinely awful. There was nothing that was off limits with Noom. It's just that I had to like eat everything in the correct portion. So I was like, I want 90% French fries, 10% something else. And it was like, no, it needs to be like 10% French fries. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. So now I have to like start from scratch with my like willpower because I've messed it up so badly.
It's so true. I used to be so healthy and then, you know, you let it go for like a week or 2 and suddenly it's so hard to go back.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what my protein shake was this morning, was me attempting to try and like get my body back into being healthy. But also my husband just sent me a picture of this amazing burger that he got for lunch. And I was just like, I hate my life
thanks
so much. So for dinner, we're going to have cauliflower, potatoes, and sausages. Which is, you know, fine. It's not like all green, fresh, healthy, but there's cauliflower in there. The thing is, I only like 3 vegetables. I like okra. I like cauliflower. I like bell peppers. That's about it.
Yeah.
I would also eat like yellow squash and zucchini, the only kind of squash that I like, but Javi will not. And so I'm like, this takes like my 5 vegetables down to like, there's just 3.
Sad.
Yeah, I know. Ah, man.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Anything else exciting going on in your world?
No, I have some great book recommendations though. So is that next or am I skipping ahead?
No, absolutely. Let's do the book recs and then we can do word of the
Okay.
week or word of the week, then book recs, whatever you want.
Okay. So I have read many books since the last time we recorded an episode because I'm speeding toward my end of the year goal.
You're hilarious.
So first of all, speaking of bees, I read Small Favors by Aaron A. Craig, who wrote House of Salt and Sorrows. And so the cover is all like with bees and like honey dripping off of the letters and stuff. So that's what I thought of when you said that. So I know a few things about bees now because it was in the book. But it's the Rumpelstiltskin retelling, if people don't know what that is. I will say it was not what I expected when you hear Rumpelstiltskin retelling. It's definitely more on the line of like little deals that are worse than you expect, right? That you make a deal, you're like, oh, that sounds fine, but then it's really terrible, as opposed to like weaving anything into gold or babies and stuff like that.
She kind of did a similar thing in House of Salt and Sorrows, which is a retelling she wrote of the 12 Dancing Princesses, where basically you find out at the end that the whole plot has hinged on this one deal that didn't seem like that bad of a deal when it was made. And then it actually resulted in this big, horrible book. We covered that book on TPBC if anyone is interested. But and that book was like a horror fantasy. Is Small Favors kind of scary?
It wasn't as dark. Like, even if you look at the cover, it's a yellow and gold cover. So it didn't feel as dark, but I think it was. It has a very similar vibe to House of Salt and Sorrow. I'll say that.
Okay.
But it wasn't what I expected. Like, it's not really a spoiler, but within the first 50 pages, there are 2 pregnant women, and neither of them have any bearing on the deals that go on, which is weird because that's like the whole thing about Rumpelstiltskin getting your firstborn child.
That is so funny. She totally tricked everyone.
Yeah, it was like a trick. So if you go into it with the understanding, this is how I say it, it's an inspired by as opposed to a based on.
Right.
If you go into it like that, I think you're going to really like it because it was very interesting.
Oh my gosh.
But if you go into it thinking it was good. But if you go into it thinking it's Rumpelstiltskin, you'll be, I think, a little let down because it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
But it was good. And the bees were an interesting element. So that's funny that you said that.
The bees. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Man, I want to read that so bad. I have to add that to my list. Any other book recs?
Yes. And then I read The Mirror Visitor Quartet by Christelle Dabos. Oh my gosh, guys. This was so good. It's originally in French. And I think it's a YA fantasy. It's definitely fantasy. I could not tell you to save my life how old any of the people in the book are, but I think it's YA. And it's so good. It's 4 books. And I just love them so much. I think they were my favorite books I've read this year. I love the main character and I love where the plot goes. And I don't know how to gauge writing when it's translated, but so I don't know how many liberties were taken with it, but it was also written very well. So I would highly recommend those. They were so good.
Wow.
Yes.
That sounds awesome. I just added.
I was gonna say, you look like you're judging me. You're like, fine.
I just added Small Favors to my cart at bookshop.org. You guys, if you want to buy your books online, I strongly recommend purchasing either from thrift books if you're poor, because I do that all the time, or bookshop.org, because basically you can buy your books online just like you would anywhere else, but they purchase from independent bookstores around the country. So you can actually support independent bookstores that are dying out. Anyways, little what do you call it? Public service PSA, public service announcement. Bookshop.org. We're not sponsored or anything, but I sure love bookshop.org. I just ordered like 6 books on it this morning. Javi woke up and he goes in here and he's looking at all of my books that are all over the place because I only have one bookshelf and it's overflowing everywhere else. He was like, you have too many books. And I was like, it's funny you think so, because I'm about to have to order 22 more books for the new season of TPBC. And he was like,
enough.
Oh, we need a house. I was like, I know.
I am also running out of shelf space. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to do.
I don't know. So. I mean, ladies, if you're like, I really just want my husband to buy me a house, and maybe this is the way. The strategy. Just make it entirely unlivable with books.
Exactly. Yeah. Just have stacks everywhere.
Exactly. You have to, like, you're just going to have to expand to a new room. Yeah. There's
Pretty
just
much.
not enough room. I'm really hoping I can have some kind of library room in the new house, but we'll see.
It'd be so awesome.
Right? I don't think we're bougie enough to get that. Could be awesome. Anyways,
Yes.
do you have any more book recs?
No. I mean, we're running kind of long. Okay, I will talk about one more. So I read this series. I don't even know if it's a book recommendation, but it's a trilogy. I believe the first one is called Neverland, but now I'm not sure. The second one is Umberland, and the third one is Ozland. Yeah, so they're based on like fairy tales, but more of the classical fairy tales, right? Not the Grimm's fairy tales like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz.
Right.
And these are so funny because they're very fun and I enjoyed them, but they are so dark.
Oh my God.
Almost everyone dies. Like I opened book 3 and I was like, this is worse than Game of Thrones.
I don't want to
Everyone
read
is
it.
dead.
Oh my God. This is so not
weird.
Me.
And it does not, you do not expect it. It opens up all innocent and fun. You're like, yay, we're doing this thing. It's an adventure. And then everyone is dead 2 books later.
Well, that's horrifying.
I just thought it was funny. I mean, not funny. Yeah, I just thought it was funny.
That is sincerely horrifying.
It is.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, anyway, what have you read, Ash? Because I could go on.
Well, we were going to do Alice in Wonderland. So if any of our cross listeners are like, hey, you were supposed to do that episode and I'm mad that you didn't. What happened was Kendall got sick and so we couldn't record it. But then because of our schedule, we don't have time to go back and do it. We just had to go ahead and take our hiatus week over there. And then we're starting season 3 next week with Sense and Sensibility, because we always like to start with Jane Austen. So I actually read Alice in Wonderland in preparation and then we didn't end up doing it. So we're going to have to do like a bonus episode or something at another time. But yeah, and it was all really short notice. Like we were supposed to record and then like 5 minutes before she's like, hey, I'm really sick. And I was like, okay, oh no. So sad. I need to check in with her and see how she's feeling now. Everybody seemed to get sick out here. I don't know if over there, but like literally everybody got sick over here. Like in Texas, it seems like all my Texas peeps and family got sick over December. But yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about Alice in Wonderland. Yeah. I don't dislike it. It's just it's like a fever dream. So it's weird to follow. Yep. Yeah. To be fair, I think that's what it's supposed to be. I think it is. Oh yeah.
So yeah,
it is absolutely achieved what it was supposed to achieve.
Yeah.
So if you like whimsical things and you don't really care about like a plot that's easier to follow, then you'll coherent. Coherent. Yeah. If you want a coherent plot, you probably won't like it that much, but I think everyone should read it once because it's really short. But if you're like, I like whimsical things and I don't care about coherency, go check it out. That's the book for you. I think that's about it. I really want to read Small Favors now. I've been waiting for that book to come out, so I'm excited.
I know it's good. And now I'm really excited too about Gilded by Marissa Meyer, because that's also a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, but it seems like it's going a completely different direction with it. So I'm like, perfect. I can get both ends.
She is the queen of retelling. So
gosh, I love her. I noticed I bring her up a lot on this podcast. I didn't realize she was one of my favorite authors until we started doing this. And she comes up so much.
She has a writing podcast.
I believe. I haven't listened to
Writer,
it.
I think.
Yeah.
Gosh, I listened to a little bit of her episode where she interviewed Leigh Bardugo. And I said this before, but it's just so funny because Marissa Meyer is like this like totally upbeat, happy person, like a ray of sunshine. And Leigh Bardugo, who is, I mean, she's totally sweet and fun, but like her vibes are so goth. It was just like, it was so funny to see them like doing this. I love it. Yeah, it was great.
But yeah, so I'm excited about that too. No, I just I want you to read the Mirror Visitor Quartet too. I know it's 4 books and they're all long, but they're so good. And I just want to talk about the end and everything in between.
Well, maybe you can address it this episode since that's
I'm going to. I'm going to do my very best not to spoil it. I'm also going to talk more Marissa Meyer. So.
Oh, excellent. Well, before we do that, do you want to give us our word of the week?
Yes. Okay. Antediluvian.
What?
Word of the week. Okay. Antediluvian. Antediluvian. I don't know how many people know this word because it's like my favorite word that I never have opportunity to use. But it means very old or old-fashioned or out of date, antiquated or primitive, literally before the flood of Noah. So antediluvian.
Antediluvian.
Yep.
Well,
So
that's a cool word. Oh my God.
So
we have to
fits.
bring that back. Everybody bring a word
Yes.
back. Help us.
So good.
Oh my God. I want that on a t-shirt. Antediluvian.
Yes.
Ask me. And then on the back, ask me what it means.
Yes. Merch.
I love it. Oh man.
I just never get a chance to use it because
Antediluvian.
very few things are that old. But
I wonder if I can work this into the book I'm working on now.
do it.
We'll see. Maybe I can. I might be able to. Well, anyways, on to our theme this week.
Yeah.
What is our theme for this episode?
Our theme is unsatisfying endings, i.e., how to make the endings satisfying, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
What to do and what to do.
Yeah, truly.
Yep.
I was trying to think, like, in preparation for this episode, like, what are some of the worst endings? And I, not to be a broken record, but I'm gonna do it anyways. I think almost every ending I've read or even watched in movies where it ends with amnesia is the most unsatisfying.
I knew you were going to bring it up
before. And so I won't harp on it because we all know how much I hate it. If you don't know, go listen to our episode on amnesia. I hate it. I hate it. I think that is as unsatisfying as an ending can get. But that is just one of the many ways that you can accidentally or on purpose make your story's ending really unsatisfactory.
Yep. And I think I'm going to bring that up in like a couple minutes after I say my opening thing.
Yay.
But I think there's a reason that that's unsatisfying. And I think it's broader than just amnesia. So anyway, because I'm an English literature major, I was going to bring up the modernists and postmodernists, not like heavily, but this was a thing that we learned that they purposefully made their endings unsatisfying, essentially because that's how they felt life was. And they wanted to correctly emulate life in their writing. And first of all, I don't know that life is always that way. I mean, life definitely has disappointments and it doesn't go the way you want, but I don't know that we can say that it's always unsatisfying. Yeah. And second of all, if it is, no one wants to read about that.
No, that's the thing too about hyperrealism in writing and in kind of entertainment is most people are not going to it for realism. We're going for an escape. So if you do believe life is just depressing and unsatisfactory in general, why would you want to read about it also? Exactly. That's just double the amount of dissatisfaction.
Yep. Definitely want to make it more satisfying than life itself, especially because life doesn't always wrap up nice and neat and books can. Yeah. So while you have the opportunity, you should make it happen.
I agree. I mean, some people, I guess I can think of a couple people who probably do like hyperrealism because it's almost like an art form. It's almost instead of a story, it's almost like an abstract painting. Some people really don't like it, but some people really do like it. And the people who like it for a very specific reason. And it's a very specific type of art. And I think that hyper realistic books are probably kind of in that category where they're valid, but most people don't understand or really click with it. It's you have a pretty narrow audience, I think, who enjoy hyper realistic writing, and it is an art form because it's not necessarily easy to write hyper realistic things. But but I think even with that, I think you still want your ending to be some kind of satisfactory, I think, but I don't know. Maybe that's just my taste because I don't like hyper realism.
Yeah, I think my general rule of thumb is that you want your ending to be bittersweet. So you want some things to work out and you want some things to not. I agree. Like comparing to the postmodernists, so like and the modernists, they just wanted, these really unsatisfying, really depressing endings. And then you go to like the romantics who were, I mean, sometimes a little eerie, but they were mostly positive writers. And I think, this is my theory, I think that's why they were big on poetry, because poetry doesn't require an ending. And I think if your ending is too happy, that's just as unsatisfying as a too depressing
Totally
ending.
Agree. Happily Ever After is one of the most dissatisfying endings.
Because it's not realistic, but it's not even like satisfying realistic, because it's almost it's so unrealistic that you're like, well, that would never happen. Exactly. It takes you out of the
suspension of disbelief.
What is it? Yeah, suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, it totally does.
It ruins
then you're like, oh, this wasn't real. I just read the story. Like it makes it so much less real for you. Because even when you write things that aren't hyper realistic, you still want your readers to feel that situation and that story is real and that it actually happened or could happen.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I think even with romance books where the happy ending, quote unquote, happy ending is necessary, even those, there's still something lost or something changed.
Yeah.
Because even if those are too happy, it's not very satisfying.
Exactly.
I think this is the metaphor I came up with. It's like you want all of your pieces to fit together like a puzzle, but you want it to be missing a couple corners. Like you don't want it to all fit too perfectly, because then it's annoyingly, I don't know, it's kind of like that person that's always happy and always bubbly and cheerful. They get annoying eventually.
It's true.
Because you're like, okay, life is great, but it's also kind of sucky
life
sometimes.
Isn't that great. Like, let's settle down. Yeah.
I too like to be happy, but sometimes things go wrong, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So you want your ending to be reflective of that. More, I guess, more satisfying than real life, but not depressing. Is that the correct? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's the problem with, I think hyper realistic books tend to give you a fully depressing ending, which I actually don't believe is hyper realistic. I think that's a perspective thing. Because even when life is really, really bad, like you can still point out the things that
some things are going right, even if
some things are going right, even if it's not immediately apparent, you do have to look for it. But it's like that thing that says it's easy to see a red car when you're looking for a red car. It's easy to see the opportunities you've missed when you're looking for opportunities you've missed.
Yeah.
You're going to see what you're looking for. And so that's just life. But I think that's the risk with hyper realistic writing, is that it often tends to only focus on the bad. And then, like you're saying, some books tend to give you like the all around happy ending, which is also not realistic. I think both of those endings are not realistic,
exactly.
Which is why
bittersweet.
Exactly.
Yep.
You want some things to work out and you want some things to not work out, and that's fine. And you have to pick which one of those, like which of the things you're going to let work out or not. You have to pick them pretty carefully because that could, if you make the wrong things end in a depressing way, then that can be very unsatisfactory. Yeah.
I think too, you have to know your genre. Like,
yes,
how, murder mysteries have to wrap up a little neater than a fantasy, because that's what people are expecting and wanting from that. But it doesn't mean that everything has to fit together too perfectly. There can still be some disappointments along the way, or, just things that go wrong at the end.
I think the key, one of like the big parts too, aside from what, like how it ends as far as like happily ever after, everything is sad, I think is you do need to answer all of the questions that you start out with. Like if you do not want, this is where you need to make sure there's no plot holes. That's kind of a different thing, but it's related. But you want to make sure there's no plot holes. You want to make sure if you brought up a question at any point in time in this book, it is either answered or you are foreshadowing that you're going to answer it in the next book in the series.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this too. I was thinking about cliffhangers, one, and epilogues, two.
Yeah.
So with, the idea of answering questions, I think a good rule of thumb is that you need to answer all of the plot questions. You can't leave any plot threads hanging, but you don't have to answer all the character questions. You can leave certain, character fates or character beliefs or opinions up to the reader's interpretation.
Yep.
And that can maybe be the thing that's unsatisfying or satisfying, but bittersweet.
I agree.
But you can't leave the plot threads hanging, because that is so annoying, which is why I have trouble with cliffhangers. Like, I don't know. How do you feel about them in series and in general? Do you have opinions about that?
I really like cliffhangers in the middle of series, like book to book. I don't like it when a series or a standalone ends on a cliffhanger. That's up to me. That feels unsatisfactory. I would rather have the bittersweet, where maybe some things are left unresolved, which is okay, but I don't want any questions left unanswered, Yeah.
And I think it does depend. It depends on what you mean by cliffhanger too, because you can have a cliffhanger in which the big plot question of book one, let's say, is answered, but then it leaves you with a question for book two.
That's what
versus what I think sometimes happens when the big question from book one is just continued on in book two. And that's really unsatisfying, because then it's like, okay, you should have just made it one book. You have to end something for it to stand alone as a single book in a series. And if your cliffhanger is great, I'm going to give you guys a little teaser for what book two is about, that's great. If you're trying to draw out the big conflict, maybe don't do that because that's going to be really annoying. And I think a lot of times people get more annoyed with that than curious about what the solution
I think that's
is.
true. I think
and
that's
they don't read
true.
on.
Yeah. You do have to be careful with cliffhangers. Well, every book in itself, you have to just know that even if you're writing like a 10 book series, if you're writing a 3-book series, you're going to have people who never read the next books, but you want to leave them feeling satisfied about what the story you gave them. So I think every book, the story of that book needs to be complete. You cannot not resolve all of the important things in that story. Even if you're like, but there's an overarching story, you just have to get to book 2. No, you have to give your readers a full story. It's complete. All the big questions are answered. We don't have to know what the characters are going to do with the rest of their lives. If they're going to like, maybe there's decisions they haven't made yet. Maybe the broad overarching plot that's going to go for the whole series is not answered. I mean, it shouldn't be if it's a series, but the story of that book needs to be done. That should not end on a cliffhanger ever.
I think a good example of that is TV shows, particularly crime shows, or like if you ever watched Supernatural or that kind of stuff, where there's an episode issue but then there's an overarching
that's a great
too.
Supernatural is a great example of that. I mean, I guess a lot of shows are.
I think a lot of crime, like I've been watching Rizzoli and Isles lately. That one's a good example. NCIS is probably a good example. Criminal Minds, where there's
each episode is based around a specific case, and then they don't leave the case except for occasional like 2-part end of season, things, because it's special. But aside from like the special episodes, they solve the case in that episode. And maybe there's still like an overarching like scandal going on they're trying to deal with or something, or like some like big unsolved case they're working on, or like trying to find a serial killer, right? But they've handled individual cases in different episodes. That's what the book should be in your series.
Yeah. And a good example of the serial killer one is the one in Psych. Because is it 3 or 4 episodes in different seasons? Each one ends in a satisfying way, but then it comes back and builds later on.
It's Mr. Yang, right? Those episodes.
Yeah.
The yin yang killer. God, I love Psych. God, I love those episodes. That's
I just think those are a good example of how to make the ending satisfying while still leaving a bit of a cliffhanger in the sense that the story can continue, because you want to draw people into the next book or episode or whatever, but you don't want to annoy them.
I think what it is you want to answer all of the questions that you started at the beginning of the book or anywhere in the book, but you also want to leave your readers with new questions. So the questions you end with, you do want to leave them with questions, but those cannot be the questions that you started with. You need to have already answered those. And if you didn't, you need to go back and write it in somewhere, because that's just infuriating.
You can build on them, but there needs to be some kind of an answer for people that stop, or for people that are going to take a while, or for people that just want to appreciate it as an individual book on its own.
And then you give them new questions to ask at the end of the book, and that's what they take with them into the next book.
Right. For sure. I think Darkest Minds is a good example of that.
No kidding.
It's because it's not a standalone, but it acts as a standalone, and then if you want to continue, there are 2 more books.
It's true. I mean, and that's why I felt it is the great exception, because they pulled the amnesia thing at the end of the first book, and I still was like, it was a satisfied ending. I mean, I'll never be satisfied about amnesia, but that aside, it was still like, I only read that book and I feel like I finished the story,
Right. Yeah. Originally it was planned as a standalone.
And it reads like that. Oh, God, I hate amnesia so much.
I know. Anyway, okay, so like to branch off of that, I think the reason amnesia, and I think we said this in the other episode, but I'm going to apply it to endings now. The reason that amnesia is so dissatisfying is because you want to feel like the journey mattered, that there's a change now. The characters in a different situation. They've grown or changed or whatever. And amnesia kind of ruins that. But there are other things that ruin that too. And so you want to make sure that your character or characters don't end up in the same place they started in. They can end up physically in the same place with a new mindset. They can end up, having lost or gained something, but they can't be the same person they were at the beginning of the story.
You can't go back to square one.
That's where unsatisfying endings can come in, when it feels like the journey from the whole book didn't change enough. It didn't matter. And that can be a clue that it's dissatisfying.
Yeah. I think that's super true.
Yeah.
Everything needs to matter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this isn't even specifically an ending thing, but this is, if you're going through your book and being like, I have to cut stuff. What do I cut? Well, chances are everybody needs to cut something. I'm a big fan of cuts, obviously,
True.
because conciseness is the key to an impactful story. If you are reading a scene and it does not play an important role in the plot or to character develop, and I mean important if it's for character development, like has to happen, cut it. I know it hurts. Save it for bonus material, but cut it because you don't have to have it.
Yes.
Your readers will probably gain contextually what you were going to include there. And it hurts because it can be very artful. I literally just did this with my own writing. Like I wanted it, it wasn't with the whole scene, it was with the line. And I was like, I want to include this line because it makes this next thing that happens like so much more like clear and like, wow. But I just think I don't have to have it. I think people will get it later on contextually. So I think I just have to cut it.
Yep.
And that's not just an ending thing. That's an all around thing. But when you get to the ending, that's a good time to look back and say, what didn't have to happen to get me to this point? If anything that happened in the book did not in some way relate to the ending you're at, cut it out because you didn't, or change your ending to make it all valid. But you want everything that happened in the book to be validated in the ending.
Yep. I think too, not just cutting, but also making sure that you're foreshadowing the ending enough.
Yep.
Is what makes it satisfying. A big element of satisfying is when you get to the end and you can say to yourself as a reader, you know, I didn't 100% see that coming, but that makes so much sense. And I love how it got here and how it all comes together in that way.
Exactly.
So you want to make sure you're foreshadowing and that your plot twists are not, I guess, taking away too much from where you're ultimately going to end up. You want it to be on theme. You want it to be, you want that series of events to be clear.
Yeah. I get that. I get the want to, the desire to surprise your readers with the ending, but that can so quickly become a really slippery slope because you definitely want to foreshadow the ending. And if you're like, no, but then they're going to know what happens. Maybe your smartest readers will guess, but they won't know. And most of your readers are probably not reading it for foreshadowing. So it's just going to be something in the back of their head where they get to the ending, they didn't see it coming, but then they go, just like Carissa said, oh, that makes sense based on, you know, the other stuff that they read.
Yeah. It all comes together.
Exactly. But you want them to be able to have that it's all coming together moment. You don't want them to be like, I did not see this coming. Like, this is so surprising. It feels jarring. That kind of feels like you cut the ending off of a different book and plastered it on the ending of your book. Yeah. Which is not satisfying because it is not what we signed up for.
Exactly. I think an unsatisfying ending is often abrupt or not hinted at enough. You feel like you're in a completely different story.
Yep. That's super true. Abrupt endings you don't want to drag it out too long, but abrupt endings are almost always unsatisfying. Yep. Yeah. It's making me like cringe on the inside, like thinking about like getting to the end of a book and it's just like a page and it's like doesn't answer all the questions. And I'm like, it feels like you wasted all that time.
Yes. You want answers. You want to, and I think too, you want to have some kind of an idea of where the characters are going to go next. Even if there's no new book, if it's standalone or the series is ending, you want to have some idea of what their next adventure essentially is going to be. And so if you end it too neatly, that's another problem with that, is that it feels like they aren't real people. They just cut off. They don't exist anymore. But if you give them some kind of a mission later on, this is one of the reasons I really loved the Mirror Visitor series, because it ends with her having this big mission. And, you know, you're like, gosh, I want to know what happens. But also you can kind of figure out what's going to happen based on, you know, things that she's done already and, you know, where it's kind of hinted it's going to go. You don't get to see it, but you know, okay, she didn't just stop existing or, you know, settle down into, you know, a completely different person. She's still herself. She's still doing this thing. And you can think about it. You can, you know, make up your own stories and try to think on it yourself. And I think that's another element of a satisfying ending. Yeah. That because you as the reader can think. Yes. Yeah. Because it's something you sit there and you're like, what next?
Exactly. Like going out into the world, you're still thinking about those characters and you're thinking, gee, I wonder what they're doing now. If you end it too neatly, readers don't get to have that. And it's a
Yeah.
bummer because that's what makes a story like that all encompassingness that we want our books to have. Like that's the dream,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
If it's too neat, your readers are just not going to have that.
Yes.
If you don't want to put it in the ending, you're like, it just doesn't fit. Then that's what the epilogue is for. Like, really.
Yes. I do want to talk about epilogues. So
Talk about it.
I know I love epilogues so much. This is where I think it's especially important that if you're going to do an epilogue, it almost needs to be character focused as opposed to plot focused. Even if it's a plot driven book,
I totally agree.
epilogues are for the big fans to figure out where their favorite characters sort of ended up.
The plot should be resolved before you get to the epilogue.
Yes. Apparently a thing is that some people don't read epilogues. I didn't know this was a thing. I know it's like sacrilegious, right?
Why would you?
But like, if you didn't like the book, you really should be able to read it and have an ending where the epilogue isn't necessary. The epilogue is, in a certain sense, extra.
It is
and
extra.
Like in the Harry Potter epilogue, it's, 19 years later.
Yeah.
Everything has settled down. There's no plot pushing forward. It's just everything is great. Here's Harry's family. Here's Ron and Hermione's family.
Yeah.
Here's some mentions of other characters we know and love.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives you closure to know that not just this plot is over, but that the characters are okay and still friends and together and all that kind of stuff.
Epilogues are for closure when the end of the book doesn't naturally give like character closure. That's what epilogues are for. And you only want an epilogue at the end of a series, or if it's a standalone at the end of that book, but you wouldn't like put an epilogue at the end of a bunch of books in a series. You would want it only in the last one. And it is exactly like Chris has said, for closure, especially because if they've been with you for a whole series, you're like, now we're really dedicated to these characters. And it's almost like in honor of that dedication, here's where they've ended up. Yeah,
exactly. And we want to know that. And I don't know if this is going to be controversial. I think epilogues needs to do one of two things, because I've been seeing a lot of epilogues that don't do either one of these things, and they kind of annoy me. I think they either need to be from a different point of view than the main character, or B, they need to take place many years in the future. I've been seeing a lot of epilogues that are like 6 months to a year later. I feel like at that point, just make it the last chapter, just put a span of time in the last chapter, because it doesn't feel like enough could have changed in 6 months to a year, even 2 years for that to be worth an extra section.
I agree.
And so like the Harry Potter is 19 years later. If you read the Renegades trilogy by Marissa Meyer, which I love, she has it from a different point of view. And so it kind of comes full circle from the beginning. And that adds, an extra element. If you also read The Maze Runner, there's an epilogue in The Death Cure, which is, it just changes everything. It's this different perspective, and you realize you were seeing things from a totally twisted point of view before, which is so cool. And that's why I love those books too. But you want to make sure that enough is different between your last chapter and your epilogue to justify the epilogue at all, because otherwise it just feels like following a trend. And you're like, oh, I guess I need an epilogue. What could I put in
exactly here? Or worse, it could feel like you now need to write a whole new book because it's in the same style as everything they just read, making it a little bit different, like from a different character's perspective, or maybe it's a different POV all around, or maybe it's like 20 years in the future. It's clear enough that this is the ending of the book or the series you've been reading. There's not going to be more. So it doesn't trick your readers, but it still gives them some of the answers that they wanted. Yeah.
Yes. And even if you're pulling a Cassandra Clare and you are going to write more books in the universe or whatever, you still should wrap it up with the epilogue and make it individual to that series. You still want it. If people are like, great, I'm done, you need to allow them the ending
to be done. That's the thing. Everything needs to feel, everything important needs to be answered. And you can leave a series off with questions, but like you said, it has to be character questions. And that's where the epilogue is really nice. And that's, I guess, people who don't want the answers to those character questions at all. I guess those are the people who don't read the epilogues.
Right.
But it's nice to give some of the answers about what happens in the epilogue for your readers who do want them. I mean, don't answer everything. Nobody needs to know like the details of what every day is like for your character 20 years down the road. But just like a general answer of like with the Harry Potter, are they still friends? What's the future dynamics like? You get just a little hint of it, and it's wonderful.
I just love, my favorite part of epilogues is seeing their kids. And so like seeing who they're named after, or seeing which parent they're like, or who they're friends with. Like,
Yeah.
I love that so much. And I think
It's
that's
cute.
you don't have to have that in your epilogue, but you need something along that vibe.
Mhm.
You need some kind of closure slash, everything's going to be okay
Yeah.
type of
Well, when
thing.
you do it from, unlike when you do it from a different character's perspective, when you do an epilogue that's like a significant period of time down the road, when you just give like that little like brief snippet of this is what life is like for them now, it lets your readers have an idea of what the last 20 so years have been like.
Yes,
So it helps
exactly.
them make a connection between the story ended this way and it forever influenced them in this specific way. And so their life
Exactly.
has been going this direction and here's what they look like now.
Yep, for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, did I have anything else to say about epilogues? I feel like there are a lot of good epilogues. Different POV. Yeah, I talked about this. I guess so. I don't know, just to sum it up. So I think if you're going to do an epilogue, it needs to change something from the chapter, the last chapter ending. It needs to, turn it on its head in some way, or it needs to talk about the characters and where they ended up.
Right.
I think how they progressed, and so that you can find some closure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a good idea, like when you're like, so to like apply this stuff when you're writing, because you want to, this is something that I didn't do before that I think was a big mistake. I really think you need to know how your book is going to end when you start writing it, just because you can go back and try and foreshadow after you've finished the book, but it is so much harder. So even if you don't have all the answers, you should know how the big questions end, because then you can make sure that you are A, answering them as you go, and B, foreshadowing as you go. But in lieu of that, whether or not you decide that you want to, plot out the ending first, every time you add a new element to your story that presents a new question, you should keep like another list or another document open that has, this happens to this person wonders this question, whatever the question is, whether it's about a character, their future, their past, a mistake, some plot question, whatever it is, you need to keep a running list of those and mark them off as you include the answers, even if the answers are only implied. So at the end you can go, what have I not answered? And figure out what is it okay that I don't answer? And what do I really need to answer?
Exactly. And that's a good point too. You can imply answers. You don't have to state them directly.
Yeah.
You just need to give some kind of reasonable implication about what's going on.
Exactly.
And
like if there's characters that you like, maybe there's two side characters and you're like, do they like each other? Do they not like each other? And you can't tell the whole time. And maybe at the very end, like their hands brush together or something. And you're like, implication done. Yeah, they'll probably end up together. But it also lets your readers like kind of like play with that in their mind as much as they want.
For sure. And I think too, if you're, if you know your ending from the beginning, you shouldn't try to answer everything immediately at the end, because that's just going to be so confusing.
It's too much.
And the emotional impact won't be there. It'll just be the readers trying to logically figure out, oh, okay, I understand what happened.
Yeah.
So you want the emotional impact to be at the forefront at the end, because the end is probably what's going to stick with them the most. And so you want that to be emotional as opposed to the solution to the mystery. It is interesting how often you can read a murder mystery or something and forget who did it, but you don't forget if you liked it or not.
It's true. Yeah.
And so that's kind of the effect you want to have, I think. So to avoid that in anything, including murder mysteries, you don't want to try to answer everything right at the end. You want to be revealing things as it goes. First of all, because that's just a more interesting story in the middle, but then second, because then your ending feels more focused instead of confused.
You need to save I would say you need to save your biggest plot question and your biggest character question, because that tends to be the emotional one. I think you need to save both of those for the ending, but everything else should be resolved before that, whether it's in the middle. Like I wouldn't answer, you don't really need to answer questions in the first third of the book, but as soon as you hit second, third, and last third, you need to start answering all those questions. And you can make it, I mean, this is where you get to the idea of rising action up to the climax, which is where you're going to reveal the answers to the big questions. But in that rising action, maybe that's when you decide, I'm going to start in order of importance answering these questions.
Yeah. You don't want them to be confused. because I just hate that when if I finish a book and I'm still like, wait, what happened? That's
You're
frustrating.
like, why did I even bother with this?
Yeah.
It's true.
And you want your book to be so good that people finish it and want to start it over again, but you don't want them to have to reread the last chapter to figure out what happened.
Yes, absolutely.
And and a good way to make sure that's not happening is to make sure that you're answering those questions before the last chapter.
Yeah, exactly. And you get to the end and you're like, oh no, I didn't do it. Maybe you have to go and write in some new scenes. That's super common to have to go in and write in some new scenes. And that's also, I recommend when you go in and look at the scenes that don't answer any questions.
Yeah. Replace those with ones
replace them. Yeah. Don't just keep adding stuff back in, because I've definitely like had a book I ended and it was around 75,000 words. And then I looked at my list of unanswered questions and I was like, dang, I got to go put in answers. And then by the time I put in the answers, it was like 90,000 words. And I was like, this doesn't need to be 90,000 words long.
What do I have to cut now?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think The Darkest Minds yet again is a good example of this, because there's this question.
Tell she likes The Darkest Minds.
I know. Is it my favorite book?
Yes.
Because like halfway through, or like 75% of the way through, you get the answer to the question, what happened to Ruby and her parents? Like what happened between them?
Right.
You wouldn't want that getting answered at the end. No. Because that's too much going on and you don't understand Ruby as a character enough during the later scenes for it to have the same kind of impact.
Right.
So that's a question that gets answered partway through as opposed to at the end, but you don't get the answers to other questions until those final scenes.
Yep.
So yeah, it's true. I have a lot to say about these things. I also wanted to talk about Allegiant, which is from the Divergent series. And I'm going to do my best not to spoil it. But if you have read these, or if you've heard of them at all, you probably know that people did not like Allegiant. And I would say it's not because the ending wasn't good, because I think she kind of nailed the whole bittersweet ending thing. I think the issue is that she didn't build up to it well enough. You don't want your final book, especially your final book. You don't want any book, but definitely not your final book, to be mostly filler.
Oh, no.
And
I didn't read it. Is it mostly filler?
Yeah, it feels like people wandering around doing nothing for a lot of the book. And so it feels, in the way that Hunger Games should have been 2 books, Allegiant should have been kind of tacked on to Insurgent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a good example of what not to do, but
that could have been like a part 1 and part 2. Maybe part 2 was just shorter than part 1.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that ending, I don't even know that ending was unsatisfying, but it comes across as unsatisfying because the book itself was unsatisfying. So you do want the ending to come naturally from the rest of the book.
Yeah.
I
think so. I think that's where it's important to just keep in mind that like whatever your plan is for your series starting out, just be okay with your plans changing. Like maybe you started out a series and you're like, this is going to be a trilogy, but then you're like, but everything important is wrapped up or mostly wrapped up by the end of book 2. Okay, let it end. Do an epilogue or do a part 2, and maybe part 2 is just shorter than part 1. I think that could be utilized a lot more, and then we wouldn't have these third books that kind of drag. But just be okay with plans changing. Duologies are fine. If you need an extra book, write an extra book. If you don't, don't force an extra book that doesn't need to be there. Tack it on as an epilogue or even as a part 2 if it's too long for an epilogue. But like, don't be like, I have to stick to this.
Yes. And in the same vein, don't tack on an epilogue that isn't necessary. I mean, if there's no real difference between your last chapter and the epilogue, don't include it, because that ruins the effect. You don't want an abrupt ending, but you do want it to end in the right place and not drag on, because that is also unsatisfying and annoying.
So true. If you're not sure, some people might take issue with this. I think if you're not sure whether to include something or not, there's a good chance you can just not include it, because conciseness. And then that doesn't mean that people never get to see it. Maybe you put it on your website, or you release it later as bonus material, or you release it in like a series of tweets as answers to questions. Like, just because it's not in the book doesn't mean you don't still get to share it with people, and that the people who want to know about it can't have it. But I think if you're in question, for the most part, you can probably cut stuff.
That's usually a good rule of thumb. And you have to figure out, are you upset about cutting it because you're attached to it, or because it's going to create some kind of a plot hole or an issue. Because if it's going
Yeah.
to create a plot issue, then you need to keep it.
Then you
If
have
it's
to keep
gonna,
it. Exactly.
if it's just painful to write or you, then
yeah.
you know,
Is it pain? Would it hurt the readers not to have it, or is it going to hurt you as the writer to cut it? Because if that's the case, you can just cut it.
Readers are priority.
They are priority. I think that's probably where also a lot of unsatisfactory endings arise, is because we start prioritizing what we as the writers want versus what people reading the book probably want. So
yeah. And you would think they would be more similar, because writers are often readers, but they're not. When it's your own story, you are so tempted to do it differently.
It's so true. You are so biased in your favor as what you want as the writer. And as the writer, like, you probably like your own writing to a degree. So you're probably this is why I think we tend to write more than we need to, is because we like the act of writing and we like what we write, at least right when we write it, maybe not 3 months later, but we like it at the time that we're writing it. Yeah. So it's the idea of like writing more. It just seems like a good idea, when really maybe you don't need the epilogue. Maybe you don't need those extra scenes. Like maybe you don't need to answer all of the character questions. It's tempting because you want to do it as a writer and you know that you can do it. And maybe you can do it well, but maybe it's still better not to for your readers.
Yeah. And I think sometimes too, it's like you feel so attached to the way you know things end that you kind of want to shove it at the readers. You're like, this is exactly how things go. Yeah. But you do have to leave some room for the reader to fantasize about it and imagine their own ending to an extent.
Yeah.
Because that's what makes it fun. And you can't force them to see it in the same way, which is why I think a good way to do a satisfying ending is answer all the plot questions, but not all the character questions, because the plot is really the purpose of the journey of the book, even if it's a character driven story. But then if they love the characters and you leave some of those questions open, then readers can run with that.
Yeah, I think so. I think you just have to be okay with whatever ending you choose. I think the biggest thing as writers we have to remember is that we have to be okay knowing that readers are going to believe whatever they want to believe about how your story goes on. And they're going to interpret things in your book that maybe you didn't even write into your book. You have to be okay with that. You are people. It's just crazy because the same like different people can read the same story and it's like they're reading different stories and they're getting totally different things out of it. And it is not your responsibility as an author to communicate the exact same thing to everybody, because everyone is just inherently going to get something different out of it. They're going to get different things out of the ending. They're going to choose to believe different things about the characters moving forward. So just be okay with it. You just have to be okay with it.
You can
even
lead
if you're
them,
like, I would never. Like I would never have my characters end up like this. It doesn't matter.
Right.
You can't control people's imaginations, and that's good. You're not supposed to. So
yeah, that's what I had to do with the Mirror Visitor books, because it ends not on a cliffhanger, but on kind of an uncertainty between two of the characters. And I'm like, hey, I just have to believe that it's okay, because if I don't, I will go insane.
Yeah, exactly. So then it would be a bummer if the author comes out and she's like, actually, things don't end up okay. You would be like, why did you say that? Like, why can't I just think what I want?
Yeah. But even if she came out and said it does end up that way, I now have, because it ended that way, I've thought about it so much that I now have a very specific, like, personal idea of what happened. And I don't want her to ruin that.
Yeah, so it's true.
That's what makes it fun.
Yeah, exactly. This is where your book ends, is where your readers get to pick up with their imagination. And I think that is their right. I really do think that's the reader's right. So I think we shouldn't mess with it.
And that's what makes books obsession worthy.
Yes.
Is not that you just like it as a book, but that you can go your own direction with it in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. The stories that matter are the ones where the endings stick with you and you spend hours upon weeks and months thinking, how do these characters end up? Yep. And that is like the gift that you give your readers at the end of the book. And that's also what that's what builds your platform so that more readers read your book or come back for your next series. So don't worry about controlling the ending. I think I think that's probably why we get some epilogues that aren't unnecessary, is because people want to control the ending impression.
And it's not even always clear what they're trying to control, because sometimes it feels so similar to the last chapter. Yeah. You're like, okay, well, we could have done without this, but there's something very specific that they want there that didn't fit into the last chapter.
Exactly.
But you don't need it. Just have it for yourself. Post it as a fun fact on Twitter. And move past
and move on.
But,
just move on.
Yeah. All right. So I guess I came up with a list of tips for satisfying endings. I don't know how complete the list is. You can add to it if you want, but I just felt like bliss. I actually took notes in my special Christmas notebook.
Ooh.
So now I'm back to my messy notes. But anyway, okay. So my favorite kind of ending is a circular ending. Mm-hmm. So The Outsiders is a good example. It's very literal, where the opening line is literally the same as the last line, and it just circles back. I know, I love it. But I think you can also do it in different ways, where, like Harry Potter, the epilogue takes place at King's Cross Station, which was Harry's first, introduction really to Hogwarts. So that feels circular because it comes back to a place we know, but things have changed.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of ending is really great. So if you go circular in some way, I will love it. So I think other people will.
You got me on your side.
I'm there. So I have bittersweet, and I think you can do bittersweet scenes, but also bittersweet lines. I think it's important to have a good closing line.
I totally agree.
Echoes the theme. Yeah. And you want it to encapsulate a lot of things. Ending lines are hard. Beginning lines are harder, but ending lines are probably a close runner-up.
I think we've discussed this before, and I think the idea of what's more important, your opening line or your closing line. And we said opening is more important because it's what convinces readers to keep reading.
You won't get to the end if you don't.
Closing line, exactly. You won't get to the ending line if you don't have a killer opening line. But the ending line is still extremely important. Like it's second in importance.
Yep. That ending scene is what the reader is left with, but that ending line, if you can make that really good
in their brain.
Yes. It's so good. I love it. I just love when the last line is just really good.
Yeah. I think for the last scene especially, but I think especially for the last line, the line should have something to do with the theme of the book.
Yes.
Which is
for sure
where it can feel a little bit constricting, but I stand by that. I really think that it should have something to do with the theme for maximum impact.
For sure. The scene should be leading into what's next for the characters or some kind of closure, but that last line has got to echo
the theme in some way.
The rest of the book. Yeah, for sure. So satisfying endings. I think a snapshot of how the journey has changed the main character is a good place to go if you're confused about how to end it. Even just a short scene with them, I don't know, going home, but they're a changed person, or setting up their new life in a new place, or using some kind of magical power they didn't know they had before, whatever. I'm thinking of Gallivant.
Exactly.
And he's like, I have a dragon. Like, that's a good line.
It is so good. And that's like epilogue content type stuff you could do too. So if you're like, oh no, the climax just happened, but my book is ended. Maybe it is ended. And then you do an epilogue so it doesn't feel so abrupt.
Exactly. Once the plot has ended, your book needs to end. But if there's character stuff that still needs to happen, that's when an epilogue is good.
I mean, there's falling action in there too. But the thing is, falling action is so short.
And it's still part of the plot.
Yeah, exactly. So,
So epilogues that are different than the last chapter. Character, not plot. And you want to... Your character needs to get something they want, but not everything. Because
that's an important one to remember.
The puzzle. Yeah. You don't want it to fit too completely together. And then I think a good way to end, like if you're not doing an epilogue or you're not doing a series on standalones, I think the best kind of satisfying ending is where you get some kind of hint about what their next journey is going to be.
Yeah.
And where they're going to go from here. Because again, you don't want it to seem like they only existed for the length of the story.
Yeah, it's true.
They should have a life outside of it. So those are mostly summing up the opposite of what makes an unsatisfying ending, but
it's true.
It works.
That's how I feel like become a good writer, is by being critical, is by being judgy. So
it's true.
Not just saying I didn't like this book, but saying, what did I not like about this book? And then why did I not like those things? Because then you can just basically go, well, maybe I'll do the opposite of that in my own book.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's all this podcast is.
It's true. Just analyze. That's why I just want to do like an in-depth episode on the Mirror Visitor series, because I know that, like, not like a book club though, but like, why is this so good?
Yeah, like a literary analysis.
Maybe we'll start that kind of a series.
We could do like a bonus episode or something for Patreon. You guys, you can go check out our Patreon too now. It's a Story Siren Studio, so that you can see everything for the Scriptorian Society and TPBC, and the writing group is on there, and it's free. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because I usually talk about this at the end, but it's relevant. So
Yeah, I brought it up kind of, but
yeah, kind of.
I guess let us know what you want in other episodes, because I really want to do some kind of episode series where I talk about why specific books did or didn't work, because I think that's really how you become a better writer. I mean, when people say that to be a good writer, you need to read a lot.
Yeah.
You need to read like a writer, not just like a reader.
Absolutely.
You need to think about, why did this work? Why did this not work?
Yeah.
What would I do differently? I was also noticing when I was reading Small Favors, which I did like a lot, but it ended in a way that I would have done differently. And so I've noticed that sometimes when I read books, I almost edit it in my head of like, I like that, but I wouldn't have done it that way. And so then you think about how you would end things, and that's how you become better.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Maybe that's some mini-sode content.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm excited about that. Anyway.
Do we have anything else to say about endings?
I think I got everything out.
Okay,
I don't know how chaotic that was, but
no, it was good. I think that was all very organized. I have nothing else to say about endings. I mean, I'm sure I do, but I'm not thinking about it right now. Okay. So, how's your writing going?
I still haven't done anything in a while because
you've been reading.
I mean, again, does reading count as writing because you're learning?
I kind of think it does count.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I have some really great things in mind because of the way that some of the books I've been reading have ended either satisfying or unsatisfying. I think you can learn from unsatisfying endings.
Absolutely.
So,
you can.
Just that.
What about learning? You've just been sponging book things for your writing. I have been, so I'm kind of the opposite for once, where I feel like usually you're like, all this writing stuff, and I'm like, all I'm doing is reading. And right now we're like switching. My goal was to, before I got this extra week, to get to like rewrite my first 8,000 words. I did not, but I have been writing. It's just that I ended up really focusing on my first scene, and I usually just like, skim right through it and just keep writing. Then I go back to it later. But I really have been putting a lot of effort into the scene for some reason. I'm not sure why, but I literally just finished it yesterday. And I think the ending of it, the first chapter, because it's a totally different topic. Well, not totally different, but related. But the idea of having kind of a little cliffhanger at the end of each chapter. I have this line at the end of the first chapter, and I think it's so great. And I don't think I would have come across it if I hadn't put all this effort into this first chapter. Fair. So I think it'll pay off. If you knew the end of it, it's kind of a pun, but you won't know because you don't know the end of it.
I don't know either.
I think it'll pay off.
But somehow
everyone will get it someday. But that was where I wanted to like basically point out why this line is so impactful. Because I also think without an explanation, people are going to misinterpret it. But I had to let that go. I had to just take out the explanation and be like, if they keep reading, this will become clear to most people. Maybe some people will forever interpret it, and that just has to be okay.
Yeah. Imply.
So I had to let it go. And so I had to take out the explanation and just let that line just sit. Regardless, it's going to have like a much more of an impact than it would have with the explanation, even if it forever confuses people. Right. But so that was good. So that's my plan for this week, is to keep writing as much as I can. Man, with everybody being sick over the holidays, I just did not have the time, because I was like running food to people, and I just did not have the time to actually get my 8,000 words done. So I didn't. So we're going to see how far I get this week. Yeah.
I mean, it is really satisfying when you put in that kind of work, and then you get to that end line. You're like, gosh, this was so worth it. I love the way it's
exactly what I wanted to happen. So I'm probably going to work on that some today. And then tomorrow I'm going to edit this episode to go out, and then work on the book some more. So I feel like I'm forgetting something else I'm supposed to do this week, but
cool.
I guess I'll just wait for that to catch up to me.
Is today New Year's or New Year's Eve?
When this comes out?
Friday? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, not today.
See.
I know today isn't.
Friday is New Year's Eve. Oh my God.
Okay.
New Year's Eve, everybody. Yeah. I can't believe we didn't say that, but
I mean, it's kind of a great episode for New Year's, because endings.
Right. You said that, because unsatisfactory endings. And what has been more unsatisfactory than the ending of the last 2 years?
Truth.
Man, hopefully good things happen in 2022. We're just praying for that for everybody. And I'm already reticent. I was talking about some stuff right before we recorded that I'm really irritated about for 2022, but hopefully things go up from here. Knock on wood. Everybody knock on wood right now. There we go. The closest wood to you, because whew, this year's got to be better, right? Yeah, bookshelves count. Absolutely. Everybody turn and knock on your bookshelves. No, don't say that. Everybody knock on wood.
That's what everyone said last year. And then,
I keep seeing the, okay, everyone, we're going to walk into 2022. Everyone be really good. Don't touch anything. And I was like, I remember when people posted that last year, and we see how that went. So I feel like some people are just entering every new year at this point with like baseball bats on their shoulders, like just ready to go.
It's so true.
Oh man, here we go. So here we go into 2022. Hopefully, as far as writing and reading goes, I'm looking forward to some really great books for reading and maybe some fun writing accomplishments.
Do you have a favorite book from the year? Just out of curiosity.
Ooh, that's smart.
Because mine was the Mirror Visitor series. I know it's kind of a cheat because it's 4 books, but
it is kind of a cheat. But you clearly love it. From this year, man, I'm sure I do. Favorite series, I'm going to go with the Shadow and Bone series, which is, everyone's probably like, oh my God, it's so popular. Yeah, but it was actually really, really good.
It was good.
And I only started it because it was popular. And I typically don't like popular things on principle.
Right.
Because the goth in me is like, absolutely not.
Rebel.
But it was really good. So for a series, I would say that one. For a standalone, I probably will take this back in favor of a different book next episode when I remember it. But what I will go with this then. Not my favorite book, but the book that has stood out to me since I read it, that comes to mind the most this year, Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin, I believe. Yeah, Shelby Mahurin. That one has just, since I read it, has just, so many things about it have just stuck with me. She definitely I don't even remember the ending that much, but it must have been good because
but it stuck with you somehow.
With me like this whole year.
That emotional, satisfactory ending.
Yeah, it was very sad. The whole book, but especially the ending, was very satisfying. And now I'm just like, I really want to know what happens, but I also feel like she ended it so well that I don't I'm not stressed not reading the next book, but I will probably at some point read the next book. So.
Right. Yeah. For most of the year, the Bone Witch series was my favorite. And I was like, nothing will ever top this. And then right at the end of December,
and then the Mirror Visitor
Davos sweeps in with Mirror Visitor and takes the win. So I did really like, just really fast, my standalone favorite was probably The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I know it's a classic and stuff, but gosh, it was good.
See, I was just thinking about that because we have spoilers for TPBC. We are going to do The Hunchback of Notre Dame this season 3, and Carissa is going to join us.
I'm so excited.
It's going to be fun. We have very fun stuff planned for both podcasts in 2022. So that'll be fun, and we'll be doing more stuff together. And if you guys have not yet, you should first of all follow us on social media. We are the Scripturian Society. We're on Instagram and TikTok. We're also on Facebook. We don't really do anything on Facebook right now, but Carissa does all of the stuff on TikTok. So if you want some like super funny writer content, go follow the Scripturian Society on TikTok. It's all Carissa and it's all fun. On Instagram, our Instagram is also really fun to follow. It's lots of like little clips from episodes and summaries of things and little like lists of writing tips, and is also all thanks to Carissa. So everybody applaud Carissa. And
applause for myself. That seems weird. Anyway, go on.
I applaud myself constantly. But yeah, so you guys can follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and you guys can check us out now. We finally have a web presence in the sense of a website. It is on storysirensstudio.com. We share the website with That Pretentious Book Club because we are both productions of Story Siren Studio. So soon we're going to actually have some TSS merch, which will be great. There's some new Story Siren Studio merch that is also really cute. You guys, it's a mermaid reading a book with headphones on. So I'm just saying, who doesn't want that merch? I want all of it. But soon there's also going to be TSS merch, which I'm also going to have all of. And maybe I'm going to be really poor in 2022. But yeah, so go check us out. You guys can email us at contact@storysirensstudio.com if you have episode recommendations or questions. And if you want to join the free writing group, it is on Patreon. It is free. Just come talk about writing with us.
Yeah.
I think that's all. That's all I got.
Cool.
So until next week, everybody. First of all, happy New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Happy 2022. Good luck to everybody. And until
may it be better than last year.
May it be better than last. Oh God, let it be better than last year.
I was looking at some things from the beginning of the year, and I was like, man, I was so just excited in January and February, and then so many things went wrong
badly
in my life later in the year.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Ain't that the truth?
There was death. There was loss of job. It was just a rough year. And I was so optimistic back at the beginning.
Well, here's to optimism. Let's all try and remain optimistic, at least
Keeping
about the little things. Look for the little things that are going right.
Exactly.
They're there.
Life is bittersweet. Things are going wrong, but things are also going right.
Ain't it though? They are though. Yeah. Maybe I'll get some French fries today. That'll be going right.
The little things.
The little things. Well, until next week, everybody, keep writing.
And we'll see you on the next page.